We have a president who is elected from the body of the Congress in the United States Senate, who has profound respect for the Congress and how this system works between the executive and Congress. And the effort was made that we're going to allow, that we're going to give Congress members an opportunity to legislate, which is their duty, and that we're going to lay out an agenda of what we'd like to see them move forward with. And we allowed that process to happen. Now, along that way, the process was hijacked, and it derailed a lot of the calendar and ambitions to want to move forward. So, did it work out as well as I think the administration would have hoped for?
No,
Probably
but there's
not.
only one president, and when a president takes the lead and pushes the Congress along, it's a very different animal, and it looks different to the public
I think we've seen
from
that
when
in
the
the past
president gives the Congress the lead and says, "Go ahead and."
Right, and I think we've seen that in the past month when the president engaged and actually began to call members of Congress and demand action to move forward, from having the bipartisan summit that he had at the Blair House, to his past weeks of campaigning around the country on this issue, to him directly calling members of Congress and pushing this forward. Yes, absolutely, we can see that when a president engages, you begin to see movement in a different form. And if a decision was made to move much sooner, great, but I mean, what you're saying is that we should have expected members of Congress to not be able to do their job and to not be able to work professionally and cooperatively in a manner. You would have had to assume the worst among members of Congress, and we tend to want to assume the best in our leaders and members of Congress.
Go ahead, Adolfo.
But this isn't a parliamentary system. In our system, the president proposes and the Congress disposes. And the president in this instance did not do so. He was absent from the debate for much too long of a period of time. The problem is that Andres mentions about the president making calls in the last month, and frankly, and this is not me saying this, but consequences of concessions, bribes, an executive order on abortion, which is center to the Democratic Party to implement the Hyde Amendment. All of these things were done when the environment was already poisoned. And frankly, when his agenda had been altered significantly from his initial proposals, which did include a public option. So I think had the president been active, as you mentioned, and been forceful, and people expect that of the chief executive of the United States with respect to this initiative, I think the result would have been different. This is not a parliamentary system. This is not a system where you tell 535 people, have at it. Through committee, and then I'll react to it. I am convinced that when the books are written about this administration, when people start writing their books after they leave the administration in 3 or 4 years, that what I'm saying today in terms of the Monday morning quarterback will be written about, which is we missed an opportunity to exert the leadership. We could have had a different result, and I believe a bipartisan result. The president had the bully pulpit, he had public opinion with him, he had large majorities, and he had Republicans initially who wanted to work with him. And all of this was squandered.
Well, that's very even-handed of you, Adolfo, to give that kind of analysis when, if the president had come roaring out of the gate last spring after the auto companies and the banks were propped up, and he said, okay, I have the bid in my teeth on health care, with his very high approval ratings at that point, the timeline might have been shorter, and the outcome might have been shorter in a way that you would have hated. Well, so I have to give you a lot of I have to give you a lot of credit for it.
I understand that, but putting aside, there's a lot of truth to that. But that's what the commander-in-chief and the results of elections are about. Senator McCain, I worked for Senator McCain on his campaign, as you know. Senator McCain said something: elections have consequences, meaning the other guy won the election. You have 100 days, 120 days. I'm not making this up. This is conventional American political 101 analysis. You have 100 days or so to get things done. Yes, it might not have been the result that I ideally wanted. I understand the point, but we're talking about the Obama administration's now, I think, diminished leadership. His approval ratings are certainly below 50%. They're at the lowest of his presidency. And this is the time when he's signing his so-called signature legislation. So I think he's lost political capital that he can't recover. The outcome might have been something I wouldn't have liked, but I think from the perspective of where his thinking is and moving forward, if he doesn't change with regard to immigration, with regard to financial reform of the systems, the banking systems and so forth, and climate change, we're going to see a repetition of the healthcare debate.
Very quickly before we go to another break, will this change the game plan for the other big initiatives remaining in this administration?
I think this entire process has changed the initiative for all. Has changed the process for all initiatives moving forward, and how both majority leaders, how the leaders in both sides of Congress will move forward, and how the president moves forward with the rest of his agenda.